obviously given it we're tendering, we haven't chosen a ship.
I think it's a good message insofar as the government has given us some additional funding, £115 million, which is gratefully received. It's not a reorganisation of the existing funding, it's new funding, so that's enabled us to make an announcement that we can go out to tender for 2 ships, and the Transport Minister made it very, very clear that those 2 ships will be designated for what was formerly known as the Skye Triangle, but seems to be gaining momentum in terms of being called the Little Minch services. So instead of just being the Hebrides as it is at the moment, the route will be split with 2 different vessels, certainly during the summer timetable. So I think that's a really positive message.
To what degree are these new vessels going to be tailor-made for the routes?
Well, we spend an awful lot of time researching the routes. We do heat mapping, which is basically looking at the number of passengers, the number of cars, the number of lorries, and what we're proposing to build is more than adequate for not only what is experienced today, bearing in mind it's 1 ship and it then becomes 2, but also we've done the economic modelling, or CalMac have, over the last for the next 30 years. So bearing that in mind, you know, we're not going to build something which has you know, no useful life after 15 years. The only thing I would say is that obviously we're heading towards net zero at the moment. These are not net zero. They will use about 40% less energy, less fuel than traditionally the ships did, which is partially the way there, but of course everybody wants to get to net zero, and near zero is genuinely zero. So one of the elements that we've had to build in is thinking about how we could maybe do a midlife retrofit if another suitable fuel source comes along. Could be hydrogen, could be ammonia, could be, you know, any other fuel source instead. What we do know at the moment is that it's really quite difficult to believe that we would have a battery solution on routes like this, a pure battery solution. We're heading that way with the small vessel replacement programme for some of the smaller islands. That programme should be going out to tender within Q1 next year, but certainly the technology is simply not there, and to be frank, we just can't wait. So that's the reason we're building the ships now.
After the winter and summer of discontent due to technical cancellations, how fair is it to say you didn't offer an optimistic view that anything's going to happen quickly?
Well, we can't magic ships up out of nowhere, so a ship takes about 2.5 years to build. So bearing in mind we intend to build 2, and we hope to be able to contract them either in December 2022 or January 2023. The sooner the better. The sooner we contract them, the sooner we will receive them into the network. So in terms of second-hand ships, it's a really, really difficult space. I mentioned today that there's been about 620, 630 ships offered to us in the last 6 years, and the reality is we've only managed to secure 1, and it is not an issue of money. Certainly the government, when we identified what was the Utna, which became the Lot Friesche, which now is trading open to Craignear, there was a really, really quick turnaround in a matter of days. So it's not an issue of money, it's an issue of us professionally finding the right ships. And to be honest with you, the vast majority of the ships out there, it's a cradle to grave job, really, on other Lifeline ferry service routes in other parts of Europe and indeed the world. So most vessels that are built in a bespoke fashion, they're used from year 0 to year 30 or year 40, depending on how many years they're used for. We might get lucky, but I'm not totally optimistic.
You were asked, why don't you just lease one meantime?
The leasing arena is even more difficult than the buying arena, we've never managed to lease one. So there are some short-term leases out there, such as the Arrow, which you would be aware of in the past, and there was a sister ship to that called the Clipper Ranger, which now has been bought by a Canadian company, so that's not available anymore, but it's a really difficult space.
I thought it was an excellent presentation tonight, and I thought it went down very well with the audience in Paris.
What did you think about the fact that nothing is going to happen for you.
Well, I think that's not true, because much is happening in terms of the ordering of new vessels for the triangular route. And as was said, we're hoping to be able to lodge orders as soon as we possibly can, early in the new year, if at all possible. I think on top of that, there were concerns raised about the interim period before these new vessels arrive on site, as it were. But the reassurance that was given to the audit, indeed the reassurance that has been given to me as a board member, is that the officers of CMAL are doing their utmost best to seek out new vessels, other vessels to buy or to lease in the interim period.
We heard that there's been a historical problem.
Yes, that's correct. It's gone back quite a number of years. I think that's nothing new. The community knows that, and that it's now being addressed. Whatever we think historically, it's being addressed now.
We saw new designs there, perhaps innovative designs. Are they the answer?
Well, I think we take the view of those who know these matters and have much experience in relation to the purchase of vessels. And the fact that CalMac have been involved as well in the previous design regarding Eiley, and the lessons learned from that will be enacted in the new vessels for the triangular route.